welcome back to the Hey You OK podcast. So this week on the podcast, I'm chatting to Prince, and recently Prince has been running ultra marathons, which I think is so crazy. And the chats I have with Prince, he's such a mature outlook on life, and he's just such an inspirational person. So I'm really looking forward to understanding why he decided to do something as crazy as running an ultra marathon, his mentality, and just having a real deep chat with him. And he's one of the deepest guys I know. So Prince, how you doing, man?
Man, I am doing great. I've just been, focusing on my gym, the mental health aspect, and just focusing on building good relationships.
So why did you decide to start an ultra marathon? Like, what drew you to wanting to do this? How did you hear about it, and why did you? What? Because I feel like loads of people would think, oh, an ultra marathon sounds so good, but they won't actually then go and sign up and start training for it and going for it. So why? What made you want to do that? Why did you decide to do it?
Okay, so the first seed was kind of planted in college, right? So there's this guy, David Goggins, right? Navy SEAL, just the absolute beast, right? And in his book, the first book he wrote, he talks about running these crazy races, right? And hardening the mind. So I think his ultra marathons that he was racing, they were like 205 miles. So he's an absolute machine. So I remember in college, I was thinking like, you know, a marathon, ultra, it doesn't seem too bad. And and that was kind of like my naive mindset back when I was in college, right? So after a couple years, I just kind of just had the thought again, and it was like, hey, if I really think I could do it, or like it would be possible or easy, I might as well put my money where my mouth is, right? So I signed up, and I'd literally never been running before. Like I barely ran, and if I did, it wasn't for long. So I was literally going from couch to ultra marathon. And it was just kind of that inspiration, that first guy, David Goggins, and I was like, I'm gonna chase this guy. This guy's an absolute animal, and I wanna be like that.
Can you explain the distance of like an ultra marathon and the comparison of what that is to say a marathon?
Yeah, so a marathon is 26.2 miles, and an ultra is anything more. So typically, it's gonna be 30 miles or above. So the ultra marathon I did was 50 miles. Um, But the thing is, they actually increased the distance because at mile 50, it was just like the middle of the road, so you couldn't really stop there. So they actually increased it by about, I think it was 2.7 miles. So it was basically running two marathons in one day.
How did you start training? Because you said you went from the couch all the way to the point of running this like ultra marathon. What was that process like? What was how was it to do that first run, or how did you kind of take step by step to get from the couch to doing the two marathons in a day?
Okay, so my first run um was about, I think it was 5 miles. And that was very stressful, and it was very slow. So when I was doing like some research on running, I realized that to actually go these distances, you have to start off very slow. It's all about like leaving your ego at the door, and trying to keep that pace, because if you start off and go guns blazing, and start just running, you're just gonna absolutely destroy your legs, and you won't be able to finish the race. So I started off just slowly doing about a 10 minute 9 10 minute mile pace for 5 miles, and I would run about 15 miles a week, and I start just building that that base. But I'm not a runner, so I'm just like I like to do like powerlifting and strength training. So I had no running experience. I had no idea what to do. So, going into that ultra marathon, I came in super underprepared. I had I had very little training. I think I did it in about 4 months of training. It was 3 or 4 months of training for that ultra, I think. And it was very bad experience going into it, because I actually realized how underprepared I was. And if I look back at the experience, I would actually be doing a lot more running because I was only running about three times a week. So and most people, if they're training for distances like that, they train like seven, maybe eight times a week, multiple times in a day, just to build up the mileage in those legs. So yeah, if you want to begin, just start off really slow. Don't worry about the pace. Don't worry about your form. Just slow, steady. Keep your ego in check. Just have fun.
The ego thing's a really good point as well because I feel like I'll be honest with myself. Like there's times where you have that ego of like, oh, I can achieve everything. I can do anything, and I think it's good to have that mentality. But when you kind of like, at least for myself, and I'm speaking from my own experience, but like there's been things I've set myself in the past where I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can achieve this crazy thing, and your ego's like flying high. But then when you can't achieve that thing, your ego drops to the ground, and you're like, oh, I couldn't achieve this. I can't achieve anything. So with regards to what you were talking about with ego, how do you keep it in that middle ground? How do you make sure you're kind of not flying too high, but you're also not beating yourself up? How did you sustain that kind of that level of ego?
So it's all about trying to be aware. I try and stay in like a meditative mindset. So when you're running, you might have got this when you're running your half marathon, right? You see someone dart by you, and you're like, oh, I need to speed up. I need to chase this person down. I need to get faster, and that's not the right mindset to have, especially if you're a beginner runner. You know, if you just want to chase everything, especially in training, you see someone run past you and you're like, oh man, I need to go chase him. But if you do that, you're gonna mess up your own training. You're gonna mess up your own race because you know they're having their own race. They're going with their own goals. If you try and keep up with someone maybe that's way more advanced than you, then you're just gonna burn out. And you might not finish the race. It's all about being aware of how fast you're going, and those little thoughts in your brain. It's like, hey, I need to speed up. This guy's going faster. I need to go faster. But you got to be like, hey, man, you got to slow down maybe, or check your heart rate and be like, hey, my heart rate's going too high. My minute per like mile is a bit too low. You have all of these devices that can keep you in check, and your mind. You got to be able to keep those thoughts in check as well.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about the mentality, and you even talking about it there. It's really interesting. Like, I want to ask you two questions. I want to basically understand the mentality of where your mind was at before the race, where what your mind was at during the race, and how you got through those hurdles, those mental kind of part. Like, what you're talking about there with the ego, how you managed to keep your ego intact. And I also want to ask you about kind of like how it felt afterwards and that change in mentality. So that's the first question I want to start with, and I'll move to the second question I have.
Okay, so the mentality thing, it kind of begins like the day before the race. So the day before the race, you kind of get all your gear ready, you get your shoes packed, the food that you're going to bring to the race, nutrition. That's where it all happens. And when you get prepared for bed, you kind of have like a little internal conversation. You're like, tomorrow it's gonna be a tough day, and you kind of have that. You have to kind of like control the fear. Like you have a lot of excitement going into a race, right? The anxiety of like something new, a new experience, new people that you're gonna meet, new terrains and stuff. But you have the fear. It's like, man, I'm about to do something difficult, and you have to kind of manage that. You have to be aware of the fear and control that. And when it was race day, so the day of the race, you have to just jump out of bed. So as soon as my alarm went off, turned it off, straight had a cold shower. I think it was like 6 a.m. or like 5:30. I had a cold shower, brushed my teeth, got everything ready. All the food was packed. Made sure to double check everything. Made sure I was fully prepared for the race. Had all my gels and everything, and I had to meditate. I had to meditate because I was so excited and nervous. So I had to make sure I was controlling that fear. So I was driving to the race venue. I think the race started about 7 a.m., 7 a.m. ish. So it was very early in the morning still. And the conditions for the race were not great. If there's actually a video on my Instagram of the race conditions, and it's awful. Like the floor is completely muddy. Like it was raining non-stop for the whole morning. It was bad. Like the conditions were awful. Like there was points where I couldn't run because I would just keep falling over. But before, like, I think it was 10, 15 minutes before the race, I got like really, really anxious. I was so anxious. Oh my God, like I couldn't even it was actually very difficult to like kind of think and breathe. It was just like everything's overwhelming. Like all of these people were in the race venue, and I was like, man, these people have probably run tons of races before, and I'm a newcomer to this sport. Had no idea what I was in store for. So it was kind of I went to the toilet, and then I just closed my eyes and just meditated. I just thought to myself like, hey, I need to get my mind in check. Like you're gonna be all right. You did some running. You like you've got your mindset. You've got your gear. Like everything else is just now up to you now. So I get ready, take a couple deep breaths, and as soon as we get to the start line and the gun goes off, flying away. So yeah, that was kind of my mentality behind the race.
What was the hurdle where it was the hardest to get over?
So I think the beginning of the race was definitely the toughest. So about I think the first 15 miles. So I started running a very very decent pace. It wasn't too fast. I made sure that I wasn't jumping the gun and going really quickly because I knew I'd just tire myself out. But as soon as I started the race, um, it just started pouring, right? And this is a trail race, so it went through a lot of like forests, a lot of fields and stuff. So, you know, these fields were completely flooded. Like, the mud was awful. Like, you couldn't run properly, and it was very difficult. And my mind at the beginning was like, man, like you're actually doing this, and it was screaming to me to say stop. Like the race is probably going to get cancelled. The conditions are just not there. And whenever I was thinking, I was just trying to see myself from an outside perspective on my mind. And I was thinking, if someone could hear the thoughts that I was thinking, what would they think of me, kind of thing. It was just like, why are you complaining? You signed yourself up to this. You wanted to do this, so now you have to show out because you can't complain now. You chose to do this, so you have to do it. And that was my kind of mentality going into it. And whenever I needed that extra push, I would kind of just think about things that I really cared about because the reason for my race is because I wanted to become a better version of myself, right? It was to push myself to become the best, like to have the toughest mind. And the reason why I wanted that is, for the people around me. I want to become the best version of myself because that's the least selfish thing I can do. It's selfish to be the worst version of yourself because you're gonna hurt everyone that you care about. But it's completely altruistic to be the best version of yourself. So whenever I was thinking like, I gotta stop. I got like my legs are destroyed. I can't walk. I was just thinking, my friends, my family, would be so much better off if I was a better version of myself. And this is gonna make me a better version. So that was the motivation, because if I didn't do it, you know, I I would have lost so much self-respect from like I would have lost so much respect for myself because I've been training so hard just for this race to better myself for the people I care about. And if I didn't do that for myself, and I let the people I cared about down, then who was I as a man? You know what I mean? So that was my whole mentality, and that's what pushed me to finish.
The idea of doing stuff for yourself isn't selfish, and I really do believe that. I believe this idea, like when you invest time in yourself and you invest and you get better from yourself, it will then benefit everybody around you. You becoming a better version of you is going to mean you can show up better in relationships and friendships, at your job, all these different areas of your life. And I think it's really genuinely beneficial. I think that's really cool of you to say that and to do that. So I want to move a little bit forward to the mentality at the end of the race. Like you've ran this race, you've overcome these hurdles, you've like you said, you've gone through these really like grueling kind of emotional and kind of mental things to push through and achieve this. When you get to the end of that, where's your mentality at? And it sounds a little bit cliche to say, what did it feel like running across the finish line? Did you get this feeling of euphoria? Was it like blah blah blah? But what did you feel like? Where was your mentality at? What did you feel like when you achieved that race?
I get to mile 50, right? And I thought the race ended. But they actually had to extend it the extra like 2.7 miles, like around 3 miles. And that absolutely shot me, right? When you run 50 miles and then the person says, there's a bit more to go, it isn't over now. I completely lost morale for like a good 10 minutes. I was like, damn, this is awful. But I was teamed up with another racer. There was this experienced ultra marathon runner, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he saw that I was struggling, and he kind of wanted to run with me, and I was like, this community is great. So we're both out here struggling, kind of thing, and we realized that there's not a lot of time left, and like the race is gonna close soon. So what happens is, we like have this complete mentality change. I don't know what came over us, but we just started running. It was like mile 50. We were completely running through rivers, like because of the rain earlier on in the race. These fields were completely flooded, and the rivers were completely like knee high, and we were just like running through it in the pitch black darkness, and it was just wild. So we get to the end of the race and we're just sprinting for like 2 miles, and because we're racing against the clock now, so we completely run. I think we're doing like sub 8 minute miles, and we are just going after it. And this was a point where we were just completely out of food, out of water, and just going off just like runner's high and just complete willpower. So we finally, like, I think it was like a couple minutes before the closing time of the race, we literally bolt in, we cross that finish line, and I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry because maybe I didn't have any liquid in my body, but I literally just looked up at the sky and I just wanted to collapse. I was so like when the woman handed me the medal, I literally just wanted to collapse and fall to the ground and just scream, but I held composure. And it was a complete euphoric feeling. It was an amazing feeling, and it makes me excited for the next ultras that I'm gonna run. But man, it was a beautiful feeling, and I think everyone should experience it once in their life, man. It was amazing.
So the second part that I wanted to build on this, and when I asked you the first part of the question, I wanted to ask how did that feed into other areas of your life? Like we're talking about running, we're talking about ultra marathons, and obviously like I think everyone should be encouraged to go out and do that. But for the people who, for example, aren't doing the ultra marathons, how can the mentality you took upon to achieve what you did and the mentality you just discussed of like the planning and the organization before, the pushing through the hard moments, that feeling of like euphoria that you achieved at the end of it. How can someone achieve and replicate that mentality in other areas of their life? And how have how did that experience shape your mentality going into different areas of your life?
Okay, good question. So I think one thing about the ultra marathon is it made me a lot tougher as a person, right? And I think what people can take from it is just ask one more, right? Whenever you're doing anything and you need that extra push, just one more. And that was kind of what I was asking myself during the race, 1 more mile, and until I got to that 50 mile mark. And that's what people can do, do one more page of your textbook, one more lap around the track, one more day of the gym. Just keep pushing for one more until you just keep going, it's easy to do one more, and it's very hard to do an infinite number more, right? Because if you think about, oh man, I need to go to the gym every day for like a year, right? That's a very hard to picture, that's a very difficult goal. But if you break it down into one day at a time, I think that's a very healthy mentality to have.
Very, very like deep question, but what are you running towards in your life, and what are you running away, and how do you think that fed into you doing that ultra marathon and everything you're kind of doing in your life at the moment?
My childhood was not a happy childhood. I come from a very, very poor country, Nepal, right? And I had a very, very sad childhood. It was kind of just kind of all over the place, and very sad. So, and that kind of fed into my teenage years. I was kind of just miserable in my teenage years. I was just super depressed, and I just had like low energy all the time, and it wasn't supposed to be like that. In your teenage years, you're supposed to be super energetic, like super happy kind of thing. And because of my childhood, it just kind of fed into like I had like self-esteem issues. I had very bad confidence. I really needed to fix myself, and that's one of the reasons why I ran the ultra marathon. Right, I wanted to make sure that part of me, growing up, um, had someone that they could rely on. Myself. I had that strength. Because everything that I do now is to make myself a stronger person. So, a kid, or my friends or family, they can rely on me because I had no one to rely on when I was a child, or a teenager, right? So that's kind of why I do like difficult things. I like the euphoric feeling, but I want to do it so I become a better person for the people around me, and to have the support, and to be able to give the support to people around me in the future. So that's kind of why I aim to do difficult things, did the ultra marathon. But on a brighter note, for the future, there's this race that I have my eye on. It's called, like, I think it's the Badwater 135, and it's like 135 miles in Death Valley. And you know that really is something that I want to do before I die. Yeah, I think that would be such a cool goal to have, 135 miles in the hottest place on earth, where like no life even exists, would be a crazy accomplishment. Um, I have like a ton of goals to achieve. I want to become a father in the future, have kids of my own, have a cool family, become a big member in my community, and then just succeed in like the corporate world and stuff. So I have big goals and big visions for the future. So that's kind of what I'm running towards. I want to make the world a better place than where I left.
I'd say this, and I genuinely mean it. I think it shows a lot about it. I think there's this thing I've seen before, and it's like this idea of like becoming the version that your younger self would have felt safe around, or felt happy around, or just knowing being what that younger version of you would have needed at that time. And I think what you're doing, whether it be coming on the podcast and talking about what you talk about so openly, or running these ultra marathons, or just doing all this stuff, which is scary, and it is scary, and you're mentally pushing yourself beyond your limits. But I think doing that, it shows that you're really like you're pushing yourself to become that best version of yourself, that version of yourself that potentially that younger version of you would have needed, or like, yeah, as I think I really want to be a father when I'm older. That's one of my biggest drivers. It's one of my biggest incentives. Like, on days where I'm not living up to my expectations, or days when I'm hard on myself, or like I do this hypothetical thing where I'm like, if this was my son or my daughter, or my child, who I was talking to, what would I say to them right now? What I would say to my children, what would I like change the mentality of what I'm saying to myself right now? But I think the fact you just mentioned that you want to be a dad when you're older, I think all the stuff you're doing, brother, I think you're going to be such a great dad. And I think all the stuff you're doing right now to become the best version of yourself, I think it's going to feed into being the best dad and the best husband, or being the best person in your career. I think it's really gonna. I truly, without a doubt, I think you're gonna do some incredible stuff. And I think the fact all the things you're doing right now in the ultra marathon is a massive kind of signal and indicator as for the success and the things you're going to achieve. And I wish you genuinely, brother, from being a really good mate of mine, I wish you nothing but the best and everything. I know you're already going to go and achieve. Like I don't have to wish you luck because I know you're gonna get there. I just wish you all the best with it.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Uh, I know that, like, all the things that you're doing as well, man. I've so much faith that you're gonna go on and do some crazy things because you're just such a good guy, man.
I want to ask you, what would your tip be? Like you've talked about loads of different things. Like there's in terms of the mentality and the different things people can take on. I think even if someone, I'm sure maybe someone will see this and go like, let me sign up for an ultra marathon. Let me do something which pushes my comfort zone. But I think even just from if someone watches this and they don't want to do that, but they want to take the mentality of one more day or these things you said, but like, what's one tip that you want to leave people?
Yeah, so one tip I'd like to leave people with is just, you know, don't don't think of yourself as the past version of you. If you were, depressed, or you didn't think highly of yourself in the past, that's not you. You can become a new version of yourself just whenever you want. Allow yourself to become better. Allow yourself to see a new version of yourself. You don't have to be the person you were in the past. You can choose to not be that person.
And for you also mentioned earlier about your video, about you running through the worst conditions ever doing your ultra marathon. And for anyone who wants to check out our video or any of the other content you've been posting, she posts some quality stuff, and it is so in line with David Goggins. It's so in line with that. One more day, let's push it, let's get better, let's improve. How can people see all that content and all the content you have yet to release, kind of thing? How can they look at that?
Yeah, man. They can just follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Prince Tamu.
So, Prince, I just want to say genuinely a massive thank you for doing this, and I appreciate the depth of vulnerability. I think it's especially the stuff you went into. I think it's probably like the most vulnerable and like authentic thing I've seen, not just like on the podcast, but just genuinely in any day to day conversation I think I've had. So, thank you, brother, for going that deep and just being that open and that authentic.
Yeah, man. Thank you, James, for having me on the podcast, man. It's been a pleasure.